Our next speaker is Todd Johnson from Kollective, formerly Contiki. He's going to be talking about understanding and managing video delivery complexity. Kollective is also giving away a Fitbit fitness tracker to one lucky winner, so hopefully everyone had your badge scanned when you came in. If you didn't, raise your hand and I can come around and scan it. But if you got it scanned before the previous session and you're still here, you're still good. You're still qualified. So, all right, with that, here's Todd Johnson from Kollective.
Thank you very much. So today, we're going to go through a classic scenario of a 1-hour presentation in about 15 minutes. So we're going to cover a lot of ground, and hopefully I'll make sure to save some time at the end to see if you have questions. I've been in this business for a pretty long time, and relatively speaking, I was actually the CEO of Contiki when we sold the company to VeriSign, became the chairman when we bought it back, and rejoined the company when we rebranded it Kollective at the beginning of last year. But I've made, probably out of the last 10 or 12 years, I've spent a majority of it focused on the enterprise video space. And I'm really excited to see, finally, it's really starting to happen. And we're seeing change at a pace that's much faster than we've ever seen before. You know, one of the things that's really important, obviously, is to see what are the drivers that are really moving our industry. And clearly, in 2007, when you had the creation of the smartphone, we created this thing on the consumer side that started to enable lots and lots of video being created, and this whole video everywhere environment started to really rule the day on the consumer side. And you know, more and more inside the enterprise, you have these requirements where people have this experience within their consumer life. People can't understand why they can't communicate inside the enterprise the way they can at home with their kids, or in the way that people consume entertainment now, which is essentially what they want to watch, when they want to watch it, wherever they want to see it. Enterprise video has not been that way. And unfortunately, we're starting, as more and more millennials enter the workforce, we're getting to this point where we have a really significant disconnect between the way people expect to communicate and the way people can communicate, especially on the video front. Obviously, you know, some part of this disconnect, or the majority, in fact, of this disconnect is really because the networks just fundamentally weren't built to support the way they're being used today inside the enterprise. Certainly not built to support thousands and thousands of concurrent stream at 4K, right? That's what people want to be able to do. That's clearly not what today's enterprise network is built to be able to support. Even being able to support thousands and thousands of streams at 1.2K is an issue in 9 out of 10 enterprises over 5,000 employees. So that's the business that we've been in, is trying to help people address the problem. But let's just get a better sense of, where do we go from here? The other thing that's really starting to drive issues in that network, very similar kinds of problems, are this rapid move to web-enabled or web-based applications. Applications that are consumed through the cloud that put even more pressure on those sensitive wide area network links, whether that's your WAN or that's your gateway to the internet. Regardless of how your company has built connectivity, one way or another, we start to develop these sensitive connections in the enterprise. And as I said, those are typically, in most large enterprises today, those are your wide area links. Those are the things that you're most protective of. Or as people start to evolve more and more to an internet-first model, you still have large offices that are going to connect through some kind of shared gateway directly to the internet. So the problem just gets worse, not just because of this increase in the demand for video, but the way people are actually consuming applications. So, one of the challenges that we're seeing on the broadcast video side is that more and more what people want to consume is people want to consume live. So there's not just this demand on the video on demand, but people want to participate in large broadcasts. We recently worked with a customer that did a strategy kickoff for their whole company. So about 25,000 people consumed the live stream. Then over the next 11 business days, another 25,000 people inside the company consumed the video on demand stream. So roughly 50,000 streams over a network that prior had never really been in a position to support maybe more than 2,000 or 3,000 live streams. So not only do you have the big bump with that live event up front, but you get this incredible demand downstream as people want to go back and observe the video on demand. Whether those people were busy during the live broadcast or they were asleep, slowly but surely, this long tail curve can, in the end, drive as much demand on the network as the live event did. So, where do we go from here? We see now within the enterprise, as rapidly as things are changing, that just deploying a bunch of edge cache servers or WAN accelerators is not going to be the issue. Really, there's two things that consistently get in the way of that. One is the deployment cycle in a large company is so long, and the responsibility to manage those caching boxes is so significant that it keeps creating issues with the ROI for video. It's part of why we are where we are in terms of video use within the enterprise. The other thing that continually happens is that people keep trying to calculate the ROI in terms of the number of people that are enabled through that gateway. So sooner or later we get to the point where we say, well, I'll enable an office that has 30 employees with that wide area network accelerator or that caching box, but I just can't afford to do it in that office that only has 6 people. So as we go down this path to try and democratize the use of video, we unfortunately kind of turn the model upside down. And the people that are in the large offices that typically get communicated to the most end up the people who, again, get served first. And the people who are in the small offices or work remotely, again, are the ones who don't get a solution. So more and more people are starting to look at the software-defined approach. The idea where you can take the solution all the way to the edge of the network, you don't have to purchase any additional hardware, and you don't end up making some of those difficult decisions in terms of ROI. So, software-defined enterprise content delivery network, or SDECDN. There's more than one out there. We're obviously one of the vendors in this space, but the whole concept is to be able to allow your existing network infrastructure to be able to absorb significantly higher usage rates around anyone viewing the same content as others around them, or anyone consuming content that's already been consumed by someone else within their local area network or within a couple hops of their local area network. So that's the concept. Be able to deploy a software overlay network that gives people the ability to do that 25,000 live streams, to be able to then handle 25,000 video on demand views, and still have that network operate and support all of those initial applications that they run the business on. We've been doing a lot of work with Microsoft, and it's been really interesting having the opportunity to spend time with them kind of inside of their video strategy and to be able to work with them on a daily basis around this whole idea of, creating democratization of video inside of the enterprise. One of the things that we think is really interesting about what they're doing is trying to meet this consumer-driven expectation is they're pushing really, really hard on this notion of video from anywhere. Not just consumed wherever, but also for it to originate from just about anywhere within the enterprise. So we've been working with them on, obviously, their Skype meeting broadcast product. They have other partners, not just Kollective. They have other partners in that space. But being able to use it in a few-to-many broadcast environment seems like a pretty natural capability. But the other thing that's really interesting is they're starting to originate Skype meeting broadcasts from conference rooms. They're starting to share large strategy meetings, or not necessarily large meetings, but they'll take a strategy meeting where you've got 6 or 7 of the key stakeholders sitting at the table making an important decision. They'll broadcast that meeting to the rest of the team, which may be another 200 or 300 people. And the reason they don't just use regular Skype for that is, as much as they want to increase transparency, they're not necessarily trying to have a meeting with 300 people to determine a strategy. But what they do want to do is they do want to be able to broadcast that meeting of 7 people to show the process that they went through, the things they took into consideration as they worked to the point of making a decision. So this video from everywhere, we're seeing it have use cases that, as long as I've been in the industry, that's not something I'd thought of. You know, all the different town hall formats, you know, the live in the parking lot, you name it, I've thought of all that, but I hadn't thought of this idea of being able to share a strategy session and to be able to share it with everybody within that broader community. It's interesting, just some quick stats. So they had deployed Skype meeting broadcast inside of Microsoft. You know, they launched it late last year. They're really starting to use it in February. So some simple statistics just for the month of March. So they had 117 broadcasts, which is about 5 per day, about 30,000 user sessions, and those were both scheduled, some of which came out of the Microsoft studios, but way more, 75% of those events actually were self-serve. They actually had a self-serve event that had about 1,200 users participate. So as we talk to large enterprises, the question really is, where do you go from here? How do you build a plan to put together an overall capability so that you can outfit your enterprise to be successful at scale with video? And so I don't want to oversimplify it, but when you get right down to it, it really boils down to these 3 steps. And this is what we like to help customers go through. 1, you got to look at your use cases. 2, you got to really understand where you are from a network standpoint. And 3, you make decisions on what solutions you're going to implement, and then you move as quickly as you can to a proof of concept. So focus on use cases. As much as I'm excited about the industry getting away from just town hall meetings and CEO broadcasts, at the end of the day, it is the live video use case that becomes the tipping point within an enterprise. It is the place you get executive level feedback, involvement, support. The other thing about it is it kind of drives the majority of the outside envelope of what your use case is going to include. You got to be able to do live at scale, and then you've got to be able to provide it in a VOD type fashion. So irregardless of what you're going to be doing from a training standpoint, an HR onboarding standpoint, or what you might be wanting to do in terms of sharing a strategy meeting, at the end of the day, this corporate use case for town hall meetings or your big quarterly broadcasts, it really is a good place to start. Network assessment. This is really important, but I'll tell you, at the end of the day, sometimes people get overly wrapped up in the details. What's really important is, are you a big box company or are you a distributed company? In other words, if you have 5,000 employees and they're all in 4 buildings, you have a really simple network problem. And there's a couple of different ways to solve it, but your network problem's not that complicated. You probably don't need a software-defined ECDN to solve your problem. You probably do need a really straightforward hardware solution. But if you're a more distributed company, we have Wells Fargo as one of our largest customers, 320,000 employees, 8,200 locations. Okay, you don't have to have 8,200 locations to be a distributed company. If you're a distributed company, then where are the sensitive points within your network? Typically, as I said, they're your wide area network components, they're your connections into the internet gateway, and the other thing you got to be careful of, it's still difficult in some countries, in some areas of the world, to do reliable streaming at anything over, say, 500K. It's just the way it works. So, as we boil down to making a decision, don't make it too complicated. Start with that overall use case that you had to begin with. You need to be able to stream to thousands of employees. I say you should target 50% of your employee base as kind of your high limit. That makes you pretty safe. Even if you're going to do something really, really important, if you have more than 10,000 employees, it's a challenge to get more than 50% of them online at any one point in time. So start with that as your kind of high limit. Make decisions about what your compelling event will be. Put a stake in the ground, 3 months out, 6 months out. I can almost guarantee you, if you don't do that, whatever date you start with, you won't hit it because you have hard decisions to make, and without a stake in the ground, there's nothing to push the decision against. Then make decisions on what are the applications that you're going to use for webcasting, what portal are you going to use for video on demand, how are those core use cases, how is the actual event going to be generated. And then lastly, now that you have a good sense of what you're dealing with on the network side, you need to make a decision about how are you going to outfit your network for scale. Did you fit in that big box category? If so, hardware is a great way to go. If not, if you fit in that distributed enterprise, you should at least take a real serious look at the software-defined ECDN approach. But that gives you a basic outline on what's pushing the issue in the enterprise and a simple process to go through to make a decision. I see two things happen that keep enterprises from ever getting past this point. One is there's no owner. There's too many cooks in the kitchen. It's a house divided. I see that all the time. Those are really frustrating for us because those are sales calls that go like this. People are excited, then they're not. They're excited, and then they're not. 2 years later, no decision's been made. Those are frustrating. The other ones that we see that are really frustrating are the ones where nobody picks a date. And so something that could have easily been done in 6 months takes a year, or it takes 18 months. Okay, that's all I have. Questions?
If you have a question, raise your hand. I'll bring the microphone around.
Do we have a winner?
We do. The winner of the Fitbit fitness tracker is Lindsay Evans from Passion River Films. Is Lindsay here? Lindsay, great. Courtesy of Kollective.
Any questions? Yes. No.
Let me just get you the mic if I could, please.
Hi, how do you, when you're figuring out your network, handle mobile if your employees are on the road and they want to tap into the broadcast?
Yeah, great point. So today, I have 2 data points. On the Microsoft side, they're averaging about 7% mobile consumption. We're averaging across our 3.5 million or so installed users, we see about 8 or 9%. In most cases, those people, you're going to have to account for them streaming directly, and they're probably going to stream off your network, not on your network. And so, typically when you put something like this together, you have a relationship with an outside CDN vendor. We manage that for our customers, but that they're going to just stream directly to the device. Inside the firewall, there's a lot of different ways they can actually participate in the smart grid so that they don't count as a full stream across your wide area network links. But it is something that you need to take into account. The other thing, a lot of people are surprised these numbers are as low as they are. It's very geography dependent. The numbers are even lower than 7-8% in the US. But when you go to some parts of Asia, they'll be Some of it ends up being time of day, but the numbers will be higher than 25 or 28%. So it is definitely something that needs to be taken into account.
How does your solution or other solutions address the security aspects of employee access to live streams?
Yeah, so we address really three things. One, everything is something where you have to authenticate to get into the system for access. We actually use a PKI system so that all of the bits in flight are actually signed through a PKI process, and they get reassembled at the client player. And so they're encrypted in flight. And then within the database, as we store media, it's encrypted there as well. When we're working with Skype meeting broadcasts, we actually get an encrypted stream. So we encrypt an encrypted stream. Those are actually encrypted twice. And there's no handoff in the process of an unencrypted stream. What else? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Todd.